The great ship Dangoon's Promise floated alone in the darkness of space, and inside it, 10,000 chambers hummed with the sound of life that was not quite living. Teo had been sleeping for 11,000 years. He did not know this yet. He did not know anything. The cold woke him first, a creeping chill that started in his fingers and spread through his body like ice water in his veins. His eyes were still closed, but something was happening. Something was changing. His lungs filled with air that tasted like metal and chemicals, nothing like the air of Earth that he remembered from his childhood. The memory felt distant, like a dream that was fading even as he tried to hold on to it. Then the pod opened with a hiss. Teo's eyes snapped open and he gasped. His body jerked upward and his hands grabbed at the side of the pod. Everything felt heavy, as if gravity itself had increased 10 times over. He tried to stand, but his legs would not obey him. They felt like the legs of someone else, someone he used to know. Around him, the vast chamber of the stasis deck began to come into focus. Rows and rows of pods stretched out like teeth in a great mouth, and all of them were opening at once. He was not alone. Teo watched as thousands of people began to wake up all around him. Some screamed, some cried, some simply sat in their pods and stared out at nothing, unable to understand what was happening. The sound grew louder and louder, like the roar of a storm that was building in strength. Alarms began to sound, high and piercing, and the lights on the ceiling turned red. The ship was waking up, and so were its people. A figure appeared beside him, and Teo flinched. But it was just a woman, tall and strong, with dark eyes that held both fear and determination. Her name was Jin He. He remembered that much. She had been a medical officer before the sleep. She was still a medical officer now, her mind instinctively falling into old patterns, even as her body struggled to remember how to move. "How long?" she asked him. Her voice was rough and unused. Teo wanted to answer, but he did not know. The years had passed like a single breath, and now they were waking up into a time that he could not imagine. He pulled himself up, using the side of the pod to steady himself. His muscles screamed in protest, but they obeyed, one foot in front of the other. That was all he had to do. That was all anyone had to do right now. The command center was in chaos. Screens flashed with data that no one could read. The artificial intelligence that ran the ship spoke in a calm voice, explaining what had happened, but her words seemed to come from very far away. Teo heard them and did not hear them at the same time. The AI said the words 11,000 years and successful revival and all systems nominal, but they did not mean anything to him. Not yet. It was Sung Ho who made sense of it all. The engineer had always been good at understanding machines, at seeing through the noise to find what was real and true. He worked at the main console, his fingers moving with growing confidence as his mind began to wake up and remember. What he found there made him go very still. "Teo," he said, and his voice was different now. Not confused or afraid, but something else. Something like the voice of someone who had just learned that the world had changed in ways he could never have imagined. "We need to see what's outside." They went to the observation deck. The windows there were large and wide, and they showed the truth of their situation in a way that no computer screen ever could. Stars. Countless stars, stretching out in every direction, forming patterns that Teo did not recognize. He had studied the stars before the sleep, had memorized their positions and their names. But these stars were not in the right places. The whole sky had shifted, and the constellations he remembered were gone, replaced by patterns that seemed almost like new words written in a language he had never learned. "Where are they?" Jin-Hee asked. She meant the other ships, the other humans, the fleets and the stations and the colonies that should have been waiting for them when they woke up. But there was nothing. Just the stars and the darkness and the terrible, perfect silence of empty space. Sung-ho was checking the sensors. His face grew darker as he read the information. No signals, he said. No radio broadcasts. No energy signatures. No ships. Nothing. The fear that came then was different from the fear of waking up. This was a fear that went much deeper, that touched something primal and ancient in the human heart. They had gone to sleep because they were running from something. They had hoped that when they woke up, the danger would be gone. But what if something worse had happened? What if they were the only humans left in all of creation? Teo stood at the window and looked out at the stars. He was the commander of this ship. That meant something. It meant that he was supposed to know what to do, to have a plan, to be able to make decisions that would keep these 50,000 people alive. But right now, he did not know anything. He did not even know what year it was, or what day, or where in the great wheel of history his people had landed. He touched his hand to the cold glass of the window, and it felt like the only real thing in the universe. "We need to find out what happened," he said finally. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, like the voice of a stranger, but it was steady. "We need to explore. We need to find out if there are any other humans out there, or if we are alone." "And if there are others?" Sung-ho asked. "If there are other species, other civilizations?" Teo did not answer right away. He thought about the reason they had gone to sleep in the first place. The wars, the hunts, the fear that had driven the human race to hide itself away in a ship and drift through the darkness like a seed, waiting for the right place to grow. He thought about the weapons they carried, the knowledge they possessed, the power that lay dormant in the systems of the Dangun's promise. "Then we will be very careful," he said. "We will be very slow and very smart. We do not know what the galaxy has become. We do not know what waits for us out there." Jin-hee and Sung-ho looked at each other. Then Jin-hee put her hand on Taeyo's shoulder. "What do we do first?" she asked. Taeo turned away from the window. In the darkness behind him, reflected in the glass, he could see the vast chamber of the ship, and the thousands of people who were waking up to a world that no longer existed. They were looking to him for answers, and he would have to find them, even if he had no idea where to begin. 2 weeks had passed since the awakening, and the Dangun's promise was beginning to feel like a real ship again instead of a tomb. The crew had organized the survivors into teams, and each team had a job to do. Some people were checking the weapons systems. Some were looking at the food supplies to see how long they could survive. Others were working on the communication equipment, trying to send signals out into the darkness and hoping that someone would hear them and respond. Teo spent most of his time in the command center with Sung-ho and the others. They were trying to understand the data that the sensors were collecting about the space around them. The universe had changed in the 11,000 years they had slept. That much was clear. The star charts that Sung-ho was comparing to the ancient maps showed differences that were too big to ignore. Stars that should have been in one place were in another place. New nebulae had formed in the darkness. The whole shape of space seemed different somehow. Mine came into the command center early one morning, and she was holding a tablet with information on it. She was a scientist, tall and serious, with a mind that could solve problems that other people could not even see. When she set the tablet down on the main console, everyone in the room gathered around to look. "I have been studying the radiation patterns in this sector," she said. Her voice was calm but excited. "There is life here. I can tell because of the way energy is being used. Someone is living in this region of space, maybe many someones." Teo felt something shift inside his chest. Life. Other civilizations. The knowledge that they were not completely alone in the universe was both a relief and a threat. They did not know if these other beings were peaceful or dangerous. They did not know if they would remember humanity, or if humanity was just a forgotten ghost story to them. "How far away?" he asked. "About 3 weeks of travel if we go at medium speed," Min-A replied. There is a gathering point that the sensors are picking up, a place where many ships seem to stop and trade with each other. It looks like a space station or a trading hub of some kind. Sung-Ho was already bringing up the data on the main screen. Images formed in the air above the console, showing a structure that was unlike anything the humans had ever built. It was not shaped like a sphere or a cube or any geometric form that made sense to human thinking. It seemed to flow and shift, with parts that stuck out at strange angles and holes that looked like they went somewhere but led nowhere. Ships of all different sizes and colors were clustered around it like flies on a piece of fruit. We have to make contact, Darim said. She was one of the younger officers, someone who had learned about the old human empires in her education before the sleep, but who did not remember them as her own history. We have to find out what happened. We have to find out if there are other humans out there. Teo wanted to agree with her, but he was the commander, and commanders had to think about more than just what they wanted. They had to think about the 50,000 people who depended on them for survival. Making contact with an unknown civilization could be the smartest thing they did, or it could be the last thing they ever did. We will send a small team, he said finally. Not a military group, just explorers and scientists. We will take one shuttle and we will go look at this place. We will talk to whoever is there. We will be careful and smart, and we will be ready to leave very quickly if we need to. The journey took 3 weeks exactly, just as Minnie had predicted. During that time, Teo prepared the team that would make contact with the aliens. He chose Jin-Hee because she was good at understanding people and could talk to almost anyone about almost anything. He chose Sung-Ho because they would need someone who understood technology. He chose Min-Ai because she could help them understand what they were looking at. And he chose a young linguist named Ho-Jin, who had spent the last 2 weeks learning everything that was stored in the ship's databases about communication with other species. The shuttle descended toward the trading station, and Ho-Jin kept talking to the people who controlled the station's landing zones. They seemed confused at first, like they did not understand what Ho-Jin was saying, but eventually they sent back a message in a form of human language that was old and archaic, but still understandable. They agreed to allow the shuttle to land in a docking bay, but they sent a clear message. The beings on this station were not friendly to weapons. The humans would have to leave all their guns and other dangerous things behind. Teo ordered the team to comply. They were explorers now, not warriors. The docking bay was enormous and filled with life. Beings of every color and shape imaginable walked and flew and crawled through the space. Some of them looked almost human. Some of them did not look anything like anything that had ever lived on Earth. Some of them were made of metal and seemed to be machines. Others seemed to be made of light or crystal or things that had no name. A single being approached the humans. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shift colors as it moved. Its eyes were large and black, like pools of water in the darkness. It communicated through sounds that made no sense to human ears, but Ho-Jin's translation device began to work, turning the sounds into words that anyone could understand. "Greetings, small ones," the being said through the translator. "I am Velek of the Zoreth. I welcome you to the Viridian Trade Nexus. May I ask what species you are? I have never encountered your kind before, and I have traveled to many places in this galaxy." Ho-Jin stepped forward carefully. "We are humans," she said. "We come from a ship that has been traveling through space for a very long time." The being called Velek went very still. The colors in its skin stopped moving. It seemed to be trying to understand what it had just heard. When it finally spoke again, its voice was different. It was quieter. And it sounded like a voice that had just learned something it was not sure it wanted to know. "Humans," Velek said very slowly. "That is not possible. The extinct ones, the lost species, they are gone. They left this galaxy many thousands of years ago. Or they were destroyed. or they ascended to a higher plane of existence, but they are not here. They cannot be here. Teo stepped forward to stand beside Ho Jin. "We are here," he said simply. "We have been sleeping. Now we are awake. And we would like to know what happened to the galaxy while we were gone." The news spread through the galaxy like light traveling through a dark tunnel. It was fast and unstoppable, and by the time the humans on the Dangoon's Promise heard the first reports coming back from the traders at the Viridian Hub, they already knew that everything had changed. They were no longer ghosts. They were real, and they were awake, and the whole galaxy was talking about them. The reactions were mixed, and they came from all over known space. Some civilizations sent messages of welcome and curiosity. They wanted to meet with humans and learn about the old times that the humans had lived through. The Zoreth, it turned out, were genuinely interested in human history and wanted to create cultural exchanges. But other messages were different. Other messages carried fear and hostility and demands. The Jarrell Confederacy was one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They had built their empire in the years after humanity had disappeared, and they had grown used to being the strongest civilization around. When they heard that the humans had returned, they did not send a message of welcome. They sent an ultimatum. Teo stood in the command center and listened as the message was translated. The Jarrell voice was cold and precise, and the words it spoke cut through the air like a knife. The humans would be confined to a single star system. They would have no military forces beyond what was needed for self-defense. They would be heavily monitored by Jarrell observers who would live on their worlds. If they did not agree to these terms, the Jarrell would eliminate them completely. The message ended with a simple question. Did the humans understand? "This is impossible," Sung Ho said. He was moving around the command center like a bird trapped in a cage, his hands making sharp gestures that showed his anger. "They cannot tell us where we can and cannot go. We have not done anything to them. We were just waking up." But Teo was quiet. He was thinking about what Sung Ho had said about the weapons systems. 2 days ago, Sung Ho had come to him with a report about the armory of the Dangoon's Promise. The weapons they carried were old, from a time before the long sleep, but they were also powerful in ways that modern weapons were not. They were based on technologies that had been lost when humanity disappeared. The rest of the galaxy had developed their weapons in different directions, using principles that the humans could study and counter. Minnie voiced the thought that was beginning to form in Teo's mind. "They are afraid," she said quietly. "They are not trying to control us because we are weak. They are trying to control us because we are strong, and they do not understand what we can do." The realization came to all of them at almost the same time. The galaxy had not become more powerful in 11,000 years. It had become more comfortable, more settled, more lazy. The younger civilizations had assumed that because they had built their empires without humanity, they did not need humanity. They had assumed that the stories about human strength and human aggression were just stories, myths told to frighten young beings at night. But the stories were true. Humanity had been hunters and warriors. Humanity had survived by being clever and ruthless. Humanity had lived in a galaxy where every other species wanted them dead, and they had not just survived. They had fought back, and they had won battles that should have been unwinnable. That was why the Zrel were afraid. That was why they wanted humanity locked away. The Human Council met 3 days later. Teo had called together everyone who mattered, everyone whose voice carried weight with the people. There was Jin He, with her medical knowledge and her way of understanding people. There was Sung Ho, with his understanding of machines and weapons. There was Min Ai, with her scientific mind and her ability to see into the future. There was Da Rim, who represented the younger humans, the ones who had only learned about the old world from stories and databases. There was Jiwoo, a scholar who had taught human history before the sleep. And there were others. People who had been important in the old world and who would be important again. We could fight them, Sung-Ho said. It was not the first time he had suggested this, and it would not be the last. We have the weapons. We have the knowledge. We could take what is ours. And in doing so, we would prove that every fear they have about us is justified, Jiwoo said. The scholar was old, even older than Teo, and his voice carried the weight of years. If we fight, we become the monsters they think we are. If we hide, we become the ghosts they thought we were. Neither option is acceptable. Daerim stood up. She was young, but her voice was strong. We do not have to be what we were, she said. The words seemed to matter, and the room became very quiet. We slept for 11,000 years. The universe changed. We changed. Just because we were hunters and warriors does not mean we have to stay that way. We could choose to be something different. We could choose to show them that humans can be more than the legends. Teo listened to the argument go back and forth. But he was thinking about something that Min-A had discovered when she was studying the Drell technology. The Drell had advanced weapons, yes, but they were based on principles that were thousands of years old. They had not innovated. They had just made their old ideas bigger and stronger. In contrast, the humans had weapons that were based on technologies so advanced that the Drell scientists did not even have words for them. The real power, Teo realized, was not in weapons at all. It was in knowledge. It was in the ability to create and innovate and build new things. If the humans could share that knowledge, if they could give other species the tools to become better and stronger, then they would not need to fight anyone. They would become valuable in a way that no amount of military might could ever achieve. We will not fight, he said finally. His voice cut through all the arguments and made everyone stop talking. We will do something much more dangerous. We will show them that they need us. We will open our archives. We will share the knowledge that we preserved from the old world. And we will make ourselves so useful, so necessary, that the Drell will have no choice but to accept us as equals. Sung-Ho looked like he wanted to protest, but something in Tai-O's eyes stopped him. This is a longer war than any battle, the commander continued. This is a war of ideas and knowledge and innovation. And if we win this war, the Drell will not be able to touch us, because the whole galaxy will be defending us, just to protect their own interests. Darim smiled. We choose to be something different, she said again. And this time, her voice was not alone. Others began to agree. Not everyone, not immediately, but enough. Enough to change the course of what would happen next. The first shipment of human knowledge left the Dangoon's promise on a bright morning, when the stars seemed closer than usual and the future felt like it might be worth believing in. It was not a military shipment. There were no weapons or armor or tools for making war. Instead, there were data files and instructions and blueprints for things that the other species in the galaxy did not yet have. There were medical technologies that could cure diseases that were still killing millions of beings across countless worlds. There were energy systems that could power entire planets without creating pollution or radioactive waste. There were manufacturing techniques that could build things with precision that had never been achieved before. Min-A was the one who had compiled the package, working with other scientists to decide what was safe to share and what was dangerous to reveal. Some of these technologies are powerful, she had told Teo before they sent it all away. If we give them to people who want to use them to hurt others, we could be making the galaxy a more dangerous place. But if we do not give them, we prove that we are hoarding our knowledge, that we think we are better than everyone else. There is no perfect answer. There is only the choice we make right now. The reactions were immediate. The Zoreth received their medical package and began using it within hours. Word spread quickly about how human knowledge was saving lives, curing diseases that had been killing their kind for thousands of years. The Threll Collective received information about energy systems, and within days, they were constructing their first human-designed power plant on one of their colony worlds. The improvements were astounding. Energy production increased by 400%, and the pollution that was poisoning their atmosphere began to decrease immediately. But not everyone was happy. The Jarrell Confederacy watched as the galaxy began to value the humans more and more. They saw their own monopoly on advanced technology beginning to crumble, and they were angry. More messages came from the Jarrell military, now with a tone that was less certain and more desperate. They demanded that the humans stop sharing their knowledge. They threatened war if the sharing did not cease. They said that human technology was destabilizing the galactic order. Teo received these messages and read them carefully. He was looking for the fear underneath the anger, trying to understand what the Jrel were really worried about. He thought he found it in a message from a Jrel commander named Corvex. The commander had written, "If all the species in the galaxy gain access to human knowledge, what need will they have for Jrel protection? What will happen to our power?" That was when Teo understood. The Jrel were not worried about humans attacking them. They were worried about becoming irrelevant. They were worried that other species would no longer need them for protection or leadership. They were worried that they would fall from their position of power. Teo sent a message back, not just to Corvex, but to the entire Jrel Confederacy. He explained that the sharing of human knowledge was not meant to diminish the Jrel. It was meant to help all species grow and become stronger together. He suggested that the Jrel could help administer the sharing of technology, could profit from it, could make themselves even more important by being the ones who helped distribute human knowledge throughout the galaxy. He was offering them a way to keep their power while appearing to give it away. The Drell responded with a proposal for negotiation. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Teo accepted immediately and began preparing for talks with the Jrel military leadership. In the meantime, other species were sending requests for human technology. The requests came from everywhere, from the edges of known space and from the deepest, most populated regions of the galaxy. Some were asking for medical help. Some were asking for weapons, which Teo had to refuse. Some were asking for the basic knowledge that would allow them to advance their own understanding of science and mathematics. Teo approved most of these requests, always careful to think about what the long-term consequences might be. Sung Ho was not entirely happy with this approach. He still believed that humanity should be defending itself, should be building up its military forces instead of giving away its advantages. But he was also a practical man, and he could see that the humans were becoming more valued every day. Where once the other species had seen humanity as a threat, they were starting to see humanity as a resource. And while resources could still be exploited and abused, they were generally treated with more care than threats. One evening, Teo was sitting in his quarters, looking at a star chart that showed the location of human settlements that were starting to form on worlds throughout the galaxy. The Zorith had offered them a world in their territory, a place where humans could establish their first colony outside of the Dangoon's promise. Other species had made similar offers. Within 50 years, there could be human communities spread across a dozen worlds, maybe more. He thought about the choice he had made, the choice to share knowledge instead of weapons. He thought about whether it would be enough. He thought about what would happen if the Jrel decided that negotiation was not in their interest, that military action was the only way forward. The humans still had their weapons. The systems on the Dangoon's promise were still operational. If war came, they would not be defenseless. But Teo hoped that war would not come. He hoped that the galaxy was ready to learn that strength did not have to come through military power. He hoped that showing other species how to be better, how to be stronger through knowledge and innovation, would teach them that there were better ways to solve problems than through violence and conflict. Jinhee came to his quarters late that night. She sat down beside him and looked at the star chart with him. "Are you worried?" she asked. "All the time," Teo admitted. "I am making decisions that affect 50,000 people. I am making decisions that could shape the entire future of humanity. How could I not be worried?" "We chose this path together," Jin-Hee said. "All of us. We chose to be something different than what we were before. And I think we made the right choice. I think humanity needed to change. And maybe the galaxy needed to see that humans could change." Teo nodded slowly. He looked at the star chart and thought about all the places where humans would live, all the worlds where human knowledge was already beginning to make a difference. And for the first time since waking up from the long sleep, he felt like maybe they had a real future. Not just a way to survive, but an actual future that could be good. 50 years after the awakening, the Dangun's promise was no longer the only human home in the galaxy. There were 23 human colonies now, spread across 12 different star systems. Some of them were on worlds that other species had given to humanity as gifts, wanting to show their respect and gratitude for everything the humans had taught them. Some of them were on worlds that humans had claimed themselves, places that had been empty or unused before humans arrived and turned them into something valuable. The ship itself had changed too. It was no longer a place where humans hid from the universe. Instead, it had become a museum, a symbol of the long sleep and the awakening. School children from 1,000 different species came to visit it, wanting to see the stasis chambers where their friends had slept for 11,000 years. They walked through the corridors and tried to imagine what it would be like to close your eyes and wake up to find that the entire world had changed. Teo was old now. His hair had turned white, and his body moved more slowly than it used to. But his mind was still sharp, and his voice still carried authority when he spoke. He spent most of his time now traveling between human colonies, making sure that the people in each settlement had what they needed, that the knowledge was being shared properly, that the humans were being treated fairly by the other species they lived among. On a bright morning, Teo received word that the Zrel wanted to meet with him. This was not surprising. The Zrel met with him regularly these days, negotiating trade agreements and discussing new technologies that they wanted to learn about. But there was something different about this meeting. The message from the Zrel commander, a being named Kethnor, who had replaced Corvex after the older commander had retired, suggested that the meeting was important. The Zrel wanted to discuss something fundamental about the future of their relationship with humanity. The meeting took place on a neutral space station, a place that belonged to no single species, but to all of them together. Kethnor was waiting when Teo arrived. The Zrel commander was tall and broad, with muscles that showed a lifetime of military service. But his eyes were intelligent and thoughtful, not cruel or hostile. The Zrel, like all species, had their good and their bad members. Kethnor seemed to be one of the good ones. "I want to apologize," Kethnor said without preamble. The words seemed to surprise even him, as if they had come out before he had decided to say them. "When you first returned to the galaxy, I helped threaten you. I wanted to use military force to control you. I was afraid of what you might do. I let that fear make me someone that I did not want to be." Teo listened carefully. He had learned long ago that sometimes the most important part of communication was simply letting the other person speak until they were finished. "What changed?" Teo asked gently. "I used human medical technology to save my child," Kethnor said. "My daughter was dying from a disease that we had no cure for. We had given up hope, but human doctors knew how to treat her. And now she is alive. She is healthy. She is going to have a life that she would not have had without you." Kethnor paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "How can I fear a species that is willing to save my child? How can I hate people who give freely of their knowledge?" Over the next weeks, The relationship between humans and the Jarell transformed. The Jarell agreed to work with the humans, to help distribute human knowledge throughout their territories, and in return, they would benefit from the knowledge themselves. More importantly, they agreed to stop threatening the humans. The Jarell saw that they could be more powerful by working with humans than by trying to control them. Other species followed the Jarell's example. The Threll Collective, who had been happy to work with humans from the beginning, became even more closely allied. They created joint colonies where humans and Threll worked together, combining human innovation with Threll creativity to build things that neither species could have created alone. The results were stunning. New cities rose on empty worlds. New technologies emerged that had never been imagined before. New art forms that blended human and Threll traditions created beauty that moved all who saw it. Darim, who was now an admiral in what had become the Human Defense Force, found her role changing. Instead of fighting, she was helping establish order and stability throughout the galaxy. The humans became known as peacemakers, as the species that could help solve conflicts because they understood both sides, because they were neutral in many of the old disputes that had divided the galaxy. Human diplomats traveled to worlds where wars were about to break out, and they helped find solutions that satisfied all parties. And when no solution could be found through talking, the humans were there to provide resources and knowledge to help rebuild what was broken. Mine became a leader in galactic science. She established research centers on human worlds where scientists from every species came to study and collaborate. The breakthroughs that came from these centers changed the galaxy. New energy sources were discovered, new medicines were developed, new ways of traveling through space were created. Every achievement was a human achievement, but it was also a Zorith achievement, a Threll achievement, a Zrel achievement. Knowledge belonged to everyone, and everyone benefited. Jinhee worked with medical centers across the galaxy, training new doctors in human medical techniques. She became famous for her ability to work with any species, to understand their biology and their culture, and to help them become healthier and stronger. She loved her work, and it showed in everything she did. She had found her purpose in the new galaxy, just as Teo had found his. The change was not always easy. There were still species that were suspicious of humans, that believed the old stories about human aggression and wanted nothing to do with them. There were still conflicts and misunderstandings. Some humans were not happy with the peaceful path that their species had chosen. They wanted to reclaim the old days of human dominance, wanted to build an empire like humanity had tried to build thousands of years ago. But most humans understood what Teo and the Council had understood all those years ago. The galaxy did not need humanity to be strong in the old way. The galaxy needed humanity to be the bridge, the species that could bring other species together, that could share knowledge freely, that could choose compassion over conquest. On his last day as commander of the human fleet, Teo stood on a balcony overlooking one of the great human cities. It was a beautiful place, built on a world that had been empty before humans arrived. Now it was home to 500,000 humans, and visitors from every known species walked its streets. It was peaceful. It was prosperous. It was everything that Teo had hoped humanity could become. Sung Ho came to stand beside him. The engineer was also old now, his hands weathered from decades of building and creating. "We did it," Sung Ho said simply. "We changed the galaxy. We changed ourselves." Teo nodded. He was thinking about the choice they had made 50 years ago, the choice to share knowledge instead of weapons, to build instead of destroy. He was thinking about whether that choice would have been possible without the long sleep, without the time that had given humanity distance from its violent past. Maybe that was what the sleep had been for. Maybe that had been the only way humanity could have become something better. "We did," Teo agreed. "And now it is time for the younger generation to lead. It is time for us to rest." That night, Teo thought about humanity's future and smiled. The long sleep was truly over. And what came next would be more beautiful than anything the humans who went to sleep could have ever imagined.